I don't remember deciding to go. I just remember waking up that morning in my apartment in Savannah, seeing the suit I'd laid out the night before, and knowing I would put it on. Knowing I would drive the 5 hours north through flat Georgia highways and past billboard for fireworks stands and injury lawyers. Knowing I would walk into that chapel and sit down and watch Clay Bennett marry someone else. People asked me later why I went. Friends who knew, who had seen the slow unraveling between us, who had watched me go quiet in that particular way you go quiet when you try to survive something. They asked if I was trying to torture myself, if I thought I could stop it somehow, like in a movie, like I'd stand up when the officiant asked if anyone objected and the whole room would turn and Clay would see me and everything would change. But that's not why I went. I went because I needed to see it happen. I needed to watch him choose the life he was always going to choose, the one that made sense to everyone but me. I needed to witness the ending so I could stop rewriting it in my head every night before I fell asleep. So I could stop imagining alternate versions where he turned around, where he stayed. I needed to say goodbye to someone who had already left. The chapel was smaller than I expected. White wood and tall windows, light pouring in like something holy. I arrived early. Too early. I sat in my car in the gravel parking lot and watched other guests arrive in their summer pastels and light gray suits, laughing, hugging, taking photos near the rose arbor someone had set up by the entrance. I didn't recognize most of them. Clay had a whole life I was never part of, a world of family reunions and college friends and coworkers who probably didn't even know I existed. I waited until just before the ceremony started to go in. I didn't want to make small talk. Didn't want to explain who I was or how I knew the groom. Didn't want someone to look at me too closely and see what I was carrying. Inside, the chapel smelled like lilies and old hymnals. The pews were filling up. I slipped into the third row from the back, on the left side, near the wall. Close enough to see, but far enough to disappear. I kept my hands folded in my lap, focused on breathing, in and out, steady, like if I controlled that, I could control everything else threatening to come undone. The music started, something classical I didn't recognize. Violins, soft and sweet. Everyone stood, and then she walked down the aisle. She was beautiful. Of course she was. White dress, long and simple, her hair pinned back with small flowers tucked behind her ear. She smiled at people as she passed, that confident kind of smile that says everything is exactly as it should be. I didn't hate her. I wanted to in the way you want easy answers to complicated pain, but I didn't. She hadn't done anything wrong. She had just loved someone. She had just been loved back in a way that was allowed. Then I saw him. Clay stood at the front in a navy suit, hands clasped in front of him. And when she reached him, he took her hands and smiled at her like she was the only person in the room. Like he meant it. And maybe he did. Maybe you can love someone and still be wrong. Maybe you can build a life on something real and still be living a lie. He looked older. Not much. It had only been a year, but something in his face had changed. Or maybe I just memorized him so completely that even the smallest shift felt seismic. His hair was shorter. His shoulders looked broader in the jacket. He looked like someone who had made a decision and was standing in it. I thought I could do this. I thought I had prepared myself. But then the officiant started talking, and Clay glanced out at the guests, just for a second, scanning the room the way you do when you're nervous and looking for a friendly face. And his eyes found mine. It lasted less than a breath. A flicker, a flinch, but I saw it. The recognition, the surprise. He hadn't known I was coming. Maybe he thought I wouldn't. Maybe he hoped I wouldn't. Or maybe he had been looking for me the whole time. He turned back to his bride. The ceremony continued. Vows were exchanged, though I didn't hear the words. I was too focused on keeping myself still, keeping my face neutral, keeping the tightness in my chest from turning into something visible. The room felt too warm. The light through the windows too bright. I watched Clay's hand take hers. Watched him nod when the officiant spoke. Watched him become someone's husband. Then came the rings. The best man stepped forward, handed the small gold band to Clay. He held it up for a moment, turning in the light, and then he stepped back. Just a few inches. Just enough to create space. And that's when he moved. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't obvious. He turned slightly, as if adjusting his stance, and took one step to the side. Then another, like he was repositioning himself. like he needed a better angle. No one else seemed to notice. The officiant kept talking. The bride kept smiling. But Clay was walking, just a few steps, past the front row, toward the aisle, toward me. My breath stopped. He didn't look at me. He kept his eyes forward, his expression calm, like he was still part of the ceremony, still playing his role. But as he passed my row, his hand moved. Just barely. Just enough. Something fell into my lap. A piece of paper, folded small and tight. He kept walking, returned to his place at the front, slipped the ring onto her finger like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just shattered the entire room for me. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. My hand was shaking when I finally looked down. The paper was warm from being in his pocket. I unfolded it slowly, terrified someone would see, terrified of what it would say, terrified it would say nothing at all. For words, written in his handwriting, the same slanted scrawl I'd seen on grocery lists and song lyrics, and the single birthday card he ever gave me. Please wait for me. I read it 3 times. 4. The letters blurred. My chest cracked open. The ceremony ended. People clapped. Clay kissed his bride, and everyone stood, and music played, and they walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, smiling at their guests. He didn't look at me as he passed. I sat there, alone in the emptying chapel, holding a note that didn't make sense. A note that made too much sense. A note that changed everything and nothing at all. I left before the reception started. Walked out through the side door, while everyone else filed toward the garden where tables were set up under white tents and a band was doing sound check. I got in my car and drove until the chapel disappeared in my rearview mirror, until the road stretched empty and flat ahead of me, until my hand stopped shaking enough to pull over. I sat in a gas station parking lot for 20 minutes, staring at the note. Please wait for me. What did that mean? Wait where? Wait how long? Wait while he went on a honeymoon and moved into a house and built a life with someone else? Wait while I went back to Savannah and pretended I hadn't just watched him promise forever to someone who wasn't me? I folded the note back up, put it in my jacket pocket, started driving south. My life had been small for a long time, comfortable in its smallness, predictable. I worked at Riverside Books, a secondhand shop on Broughton Street that smelled like old paper and coffee from the cafe next door. I opened 4 days a week, shelved inventory, rang up tourists looking for paperback thrillers and local ghost stories. My boss, Marion, was 70 and didn't ask questions. She let me take my lunch breaks in the back room, where I'd sit on an overturned crate and write in my notebook. Lyrics mostly, half-finished verses that never turned into songs. Melodies I hummed, but never recorded. I used to play guitar, used to perform at open mics with Clay, back when we were in college, back when music felt like the only language we needed. But I hadn't touched my guitar in over a year. It sat in the corner of my bedroom, case gathering dust, strings probably slack and out of tune. I walked everywhere. Savannah was good for that. Slow and swampy and beautiful in a haunted kind of way. I'd walk home from work along the river, past the old warehouses and cobblestone streets, past couples holding hands and families with strollers and tourists taking photos of everything. I'd stop sometimes at Forsyth Park and sit on a bench and watch people live their lives. Then I'd go home to my studio apartment above a bakery, where the smell of bread woke me every morning at 5, and I'd lie there listening to the city come alive below me. It wasn't a bad life. It just wasn't much of one. People thought I was shy, quiet. But it wasn't that. I just didn't have anything to say that felt true anymore. Every conversation felt like playing a part. The friendly bookseller, the polite neighbor, the guy who was fine, always fine, thanks for asking. I hadn't told anyone I was going to the wedding. Hadn't mentioned Clay's name in months. My coworker asked once why I stopped playing music, and I said I got bored of it. My neighbor asked if I was seeing anyone, and I said I wasn't really looking. Easy lies. Simple ones. The kind that keep people from asking follow-up questions. Clay, but I never called it anything. That was the problem. Or maybe that was the point. We met freshman year at a songwriting workshop neither of us wanted to be in. I noticed him because he sat in the back and didn't talk much, just listened with this focused intensity like he was cataloging everything. After class, he came up to me and said he liked the chord progression I'd played. Asked if I wanted to work on something together. We started meeting at the music building. Late nights when the practice rooms were empty. We'd sit across from each other with our guitars and build songs piece by piece, passing melodies back and forth like a conversation. He wrote lyrics that were too honest. I wrote music that said what I couldn't. It fit. We never talked about what we were doing. We'd finish a session and walk back to the dorms together, shoulders almost touching, and split up at the quad without making plans but knowing we'd meet again in 2 days. 3. However long it took for one of us to text the other with a new idea. It went on like that for 2 years. Studio sessions and coffee shop writing dates, and shows at tiny venues where maybe 15 people showed up. We shared a language no one else spoke. We knew each other's rhythms. I knew when he was about to change a chord before his fingers moved. He knew when I was writing about something real because my voice got quieter. We never kissed, never said the words, but there were moments, long silences that meant something. Nights on my fire escape, when the air got thick with everything we weren't saying. Times when his hand would brush mine and neither of us would move away. Then he met her at a party junior year. She was an education major, bright and warm and easy to love. She laughed at his jokes. She fit into his family. She made sense in a way I never could. He didn't tell me he was dating her. I found out when I saw them together on campus, holding hands, and something in my chest just closed. We kept playing music for a while, kept meeting, but it was different, careful, like we were both trying not to break something that was already broken. Then one night, he told me he couldn't do it anymore. The music, us. He said it was too hard. He said he needed to focus on his future. He said he was sorry. I told him I understood. I didn't see him again until the wedding invitation arrived. The invitation came on a Tuesday in April. Thick cream cardstock in a cotton envelope. My name written in elegant calligraphy. I stood in my building's narrow hallway holding it, staring at the return address, wondering if it was some kind of mistake. I didn't open it right away. I sat on my kitchen counter and looked at it for 3 days. Made coffee around it. Ate dinner next to it. It sat there like something alive, like something waiting. When I finally opened it, my hand was steadier than I expected. The card inside was simple, classic. Clay Michael Bennett and Sarah Catherine Price requested the honor of my presence at their wedding ceremony. June 14th, 2 o'clock. Some chapel I'd never heard of in a town halfway between Savannah and Atlanta. There was a handwritten note tucked inside, separate from the formal invitation. Just a few lines on plain paper. Emery, I know this might be strange. I wasn't sure if I should send this, but you were important to me. You still are. I'd like you to be there. Clay. I read it until I had it memorized. Analyzed every word like it was a lyric we were workshopping. You were important. Past tense. You still are. Present tense. But what did that mean when he was marrying someone else? I told myself I wouldn't go. Threw the invitation in the recycling bin under my sink. Went to work. Came home. Pulled it back out that night and smoothed the wrinkles from the cardstock. I told myself I would go. Bought a navy suit from a thrift store downtown. Got it tailored at the shop on Liberty Street. Hung in my closet. Looked at it every morning when I got dressed for work. I told myself I didn't know what I was doing. But the truth was simpler than that. I needed to see him one more time. Needed to close the door I'd left open. Needed to prove to myself that I could sit in that chapel and watch him choose his life and then drive home and finally let him go. So I went, and now I was driving back and nothing was closed. Everything was ripped open. I made it to Savannah just after dark. Parked in my usual spot behind the bakery. Climbed the stairs to my apartment. Sat on my bed, still wearing the suit, and took the note out of my pocket. Please wait for me. I didn't sleep that night. Just lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the city through my open window. Distant music from the bars on River Street. A dog barking. Someone laughing. Normal life, continuing like mine, hadn't just split in half. The next day at work, Marion asked how my weekend was. I told her it was fine. She studied me for a moment with those sharp eyes that saw too much, then nodded and let it drop. I spent my shift reorganizing the poetry section, pulling books off shelves and putting them back, needing my hands to do something that made sense. My phone stayed silent. I didn't know what I expected. A text, maybe. An explanation. Something to make the note mean something concrete instead of this terrible, nebulous hope that sat in my chest like a stone. 3 days passed. Then 5. I went to work, walked home, wrote nothing in my notebook. The note stayed folded in my wallet where I could feel it every time I paid for something. A small square of paper that weighed more than it should. On the sixth day, my phone buzzed during my lunch break. Can we talk? I stared at the message. No name, but I knew. I'd never deleted his number. Never even considered it. I didn't respond right away. Ate my sandwich. Drank my coffee. Read the same page of a paperback 3 times without absorbing a word. Then I typed back. When? Tonight. There's a park off Highway 80. Does 8 work? I knew the place he meant. A rest stop with picnic tables and a view of nothing. The kind of place people pulled over to let their dogs out or check their maps. Far enough from town that no one would see us. I should have said no. Should have told him he didn't get to do this. Didn't get to slip me a note during his wedding and then summon me to empty parking lots like we were teenagers sneaking around. Should have told him that waiting for him would destroy me. I typed, I'll be there. The rest of the day crawled. I left work at 5 and went home and changed out of my bookstore clothes into jeans and a t-shirt. Stood in front of my bathroom mirror and tried to figure out what face I was supposed to wear for this. Anger? Hurt? Hope? I couldn't find any of them. I just looked tired. I got in my car at 7:30. Drove east out of the city as the sun set behind me, painting the marshes in shades of amber and rust. The highway was mostly empty. I passed a few trucks, a family in an SUV, someone on a motorcycle going too fast. The park appeared on my right, a small brown sign and a gravel turnoff. I pulled in. There were no other cars yet. Just empty picnic tables and trash cans and a stretch of scrubby grass leading to a line of trees. I parked facing the highway, turned off the engine, waited. At 8:03, headlights swept across my rearview mirror. A car pulled in beside mine. Familiar. A gray sedan I'd ridden in 100 times. The engine cut off. The door opened. Clay stepped out. He looked different in jeans and an untucked button-down, hair slightly messy like he'd been running his hands through it. He looked like the person I used to know, like the version of himself he was before he became someone's groom. He walked to my passenger door, stood there, waiting. I unlocked it. He got in, closed the door. The small space filled with his presence, his familiar scent of cedar and something clean. We sat in silence for a moment, not looking at each other, both staring straight ahead through the windshield at the darkening sky. Then he said, "Why did you come to the wedding?" I turned to face him. "Because you invited me." He shook his head. "No, really. Why?" I wanted to say goodbye. He looked at me then. His eyes were the same, green-gray and serious, and full of something I couldn't name. Did it work? I held up the note, still folded, still carrying his words. "You tell me." Clay looked at the note in my hand, then back at my face. He let out a long breath, the kind that sounds like something breaking. "I thought it would fix me," he said. "Getting married, doing the right thing. I thought if I committed hard enough, if I built the life everyone expected, the rest would just fall into place. Like I could rewire myself through sheer force of will." And did it work? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I saw you in that chapel, and everything I buried came back. Every conversation we never had. Every song we never finished. Every time I almost told you and didn't. It all just surfaced, like I've been holding my breath for a year and suddenly couldn't anymore. So why did you go through with it?" "Because 200 people were watching. Because her parents flew in from California. Because I've spent my whole life being the person everyone needed me to be, and I didn't know how to stop." He paused, "Until I saw your face." We didn't meet again right away. That first night in the parking lot, we just talked. Sat in my car until after midnight, words spilling out like we were making up for a year of silence. He told me about the engagement, how it happened on a beach at sunset, how everyone cried and hugged, and he felt like he was watching it happen to someone else. Told me about the planning, the cake tastings and venue tours and registry decisions that all felt like building an elaborate set for a play he didn't want to perform. He told me he'd almost called me a dozen times, almost texted, almost showed up at the bookstore, but he didn't know what he would say, didn't know if I want to hear it. I told him about the year I spent trying to forget him, how I'd walk past the music building on purpose, testing myself, seeing if it still hurt. It always did. I told him about the notebook full of half-written lyrics that were all about him, even the ones that pretended they weren't. I told him I came to the wedding because I thought watching him marry her would finally make it real, would finally let me move on. Did it? He asked. I showed him the note again. You didn't let it. He dropped his head back against the seat. I know. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have written that. Shouldn't have put that on you. But when I was standing up there, saying vows I wasn't sure I meant, and I looked out and saw you, I just needed you to know. Needed you to know I was still yours even if I never was. We started meeting after that. Carefully at first. A diner off the interstate where no one we knew would see us. A state park an hour outside the city. Long drives to nowhere with the windows down, and music turned up loud enough that we didn't have to talk. Clay was living in a rental house with Sarah, the one they'd signed a lease on before the wedding. He'd come from there, would go back there, and in between he'd sit across from me in vinyl diner booths or beside me on hiking trails, and we'd exist in this suspended space where nothing was decided and everything was possible. I was angry. That's important to say. I was furious at him for leaving, for coming back, for making me hope again when hope felt like the most dangerous thing I could hold. I told him that one night, sitting in my parked car overlooking the river. I'm angry at you, I said. For all of it. For choosing her. For choosing me now when it's too late. For that note. He didn't argue. Just nodded. You should be. But I also couldn't stay away. That was the other truth. Every time my phone buzzed with his name, my heart would jump. Every time we met, I'd tell myself it was the last time, and then I'd agree to the next meeting anyway. We talked about the past. About the night on my fire escape junior year, when we'd sat so close I could feel the heat of him, could hear his breathing change, and neither of us had moved. About the song we wrote called Satellite, that was really about orbit and gravity, and how some things pull at you no matter how far you try to drift. About the day he told me he was dating Sarah, and I'd said congratulations, and he'd said thank you, and we both knew we were lying. Why didn't you fight for me? I asked him one night, when you started dating her. Why didn't you just tell me how you felt? He was quiet for a long time, because I didn't have the language for it yet. Because I grew up in a house where love looked one specific way, and this, what I felt for you, didn't have a name I knew how to say. Because I was afraid that if I said it out loud, it would become real, and if it was real, I'd have to choose. And I didn't know how to choose something I'd never seen anyone choose before. I understood that. Hated it, but understood it. And now? I asked, do you have a language now? He turned to me. The streetlight caught his face, made shadows under his eyes. I'm learning it, he said. I've loved you for years, Emery. I just never knew how to say in a world that never taught me how. Something in my chest cracked open. Not healed. Not fixed. Just open. I never stopped waiting for you, I said. The words came out rough, like they'd been stored too long. I just stopped letting myself hope. He reached across the space between us. His hand found mine. We sat like that in the quiet of my car, holding on, both of us shaking slightly, both of us terrified of what came next. It couldn't last. We both knew that. You can't build something real in parking lots and empty diners. You can't love someone in secret without it eventually consuming everything around it. Sarah found out 3 weeks after the wedding. Clay told me later how it happened. She'd noticed him leaving at odd hours, coming home quiet and distant, smiling at his phone in a way he never smiled at her. She didn't accuse him at first, just watched, waited, let the evidence gather. Then one night, she asked him directly, "Are you seeing someone?" He could have lied, should have lied, probably bought himself more time to figure out what he was doing. But something in him couldn't anymore. He'd spent so long lying to her, to his family, to himself. The truth was the only thing he had left that felt solid. He told her yes. She asked if it was someone from work. He said no. She asked if it was someone she knew. He said no. She asked how long it had been going on. He said in one way or another for years. She didn't cry at first. That's what Clay told me. She just sat there on their couch, in the house they'd rented together, surrounded by wedding gifts they hadn't finished unwrapping, and processed it. Then she asked the question he'd been dreading. Is it a woman? He said no. That's when she started crying. Not because he'd cheated, he told me later, or not just because of that, but because she realized their entire relationship had been built on something incomplete, that she'd been loving a version of him that was only half true, that every time he'd said, "I love you," there was a silent asterisk she'd never known was there. She asked him who it was. He told her. She remembered my name from college, from the few times Clay had mentioned his songwriting partner. She'd never met me, never thought to worry about me. Why would she? I was history. I was the past. Except I wasn't. I didn't know any of this was happening until my phone rang at 11 on a Thursday night. I was already in bed, reading, trying to distract myself from wondering when I'd see Clay again. His name on my screen made my stomach drop. I answered. He was in his car. I could hear the engine running, the hum of the road beneath him. I told her, he said. No preamble. No explanation needed. My whole body went cold. You what? I told her the truth. About you. About me. About everything. Clay. I couldn't keep lying, Emery. I couldn't wake up next to her every morning and pretend I wasn't thinking about you. It wasn't fair to her. It wasn't fair to any of us. Where are you? Driving. I don't know where. I just left. I'm sorry, I should have called you first, should have warned you, but I just needed to hear your voice. We stayed on the phone for an hour. He drove in circles while I lay in my bed, staring at my ceiling, trying to process what this meant. Everything was about to change. His family would know. Her family would know. The friends who'd attended the wedding, who'd bought gifts and taken photos and celebrated their union, would know it was all a mistake. He would lose people. That was certain. His parents, who'd raised him in a church that didn't make room for this. His college friends, some of them, the ones who'd think he'd made a choice and could choose differently. Her, obviously. The future they planned. What happens now? I asked. Now I start telling the truth everywhere, he said. Now I stop hiding. But I was already pulling away. I could feel it happening even as we talked. The reality of what this would cost him settling over me like weight. I'd spent a year learning to live without him. Learned to make my life small enough that it didn't hurt so much. And now he was offering me everything I'd wanted, and all I could think about was how much it would destroy him. I can't be the reason you lose your family, I said. You're not the reason. I am. This is my choice, Emery. But I didn't believe that. Couldn't believe it. Because if I let myself believe it, if I let myself accept what he was offering, and then it all fell apart, I wouldn't survive it. I started packing that night. After we hung up, started looking at bus schedules to cities I'd never been to. Charleston, Asheville, anywhere that wasn't here. I told myself I was giving him space to figure things out without me complicating it. Told myself I was being selfless. Really, I was just afraid. Marion noticed the next day at work. Asked if everything was all right. I told her I was thinking about moving. Needed a change. She studied me with those knowing eyes and said, running away doesn't work as well as you'd think. I'm not running away. She just raised an eyebrow. Let me know if you need references. My duffel bag sat on my bedroom floor, half-packed. Bus ticket pulled up on my phone. Departure in 2 days. I told Clay I needed time to think. Told him not to come by. Told him I'd call him when I was ready. I thought I could disappear before it got too complicated. Before I had to watch him lose everything for me. Before I had to risk hoping again. But on Saturday morning, my phone buzzed with a text. My bus was supposed to leave in 6 hours. The message was from Clay. I'm at the Greyhound station. Please don't get on that bus. I stood in my apartment, phone in hand, heart hammering. He'd known. Somehow he'd known. I grabbed my keys. I didn't let myself think. Just moved. When I got there, he was leaning against his car in the parking lot, arms crossed, looking tired and determined and more himself than I'd seen him in years. I told her, he said again as I approached. I told my parents. I'm telling everyone. I can't go back now. I don't want to go back. Clay, he stepped closer. I've spent my whole life trying to be who everyone wanted. And I'm done. I'm done pretending. I'm done choosing the easier lie. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing this. Please let me. I looked at him, at the truth written all over his face, at the cost he was already paying visible in the shadows under his eyes. Are you sure? I asked, because once you do this, once you really do this, there's no going back. He smiled. It was small and sad and real. I've never been more sure of anything. The fallout came in waves. Clay's parents stopped returning his calls. His mother sent a single text that said she needed time, which felt worse than anger. At least anger was engagement. Silence was erasure. His father didn't even send that much. Some of his college friends rallied around him. Others vanished quietly from his life, unfollowing on social media, declining invitations, going suddenly silent in group chats. The ones who stayed made a point of asking about me, using my name deliberately like they were trying to make space for me in conversations I'd never been part of. Sarah moved out within a week. Her parents hired a lawyer. The marriage was annulled quietly, paperwork filed and processed like it had never happened. Clay told me she'd been kind about it, kinder than he deserved. She'd said she hoped he found what he was looking for. She'd said she wished he'd figured it out before he'd said vows. He carried that with him, the guilt. I could see in the way he moved through the world now, more careful, more aware of the damage honesty could do, even when it was necessary. But he also stood taller. That was the strange thing, watching him lose so much and somehow become more himself. Like he'd been carrying weight for so long he'd forgotten it was there, and now, without it, he was remembering how to breathe fully. We didn't rush into anything. That was important. We'd already tried secret and stolen. This time we were doing it right. We met for coffee in public places, walked through downtown Savannah in daylight. He came to the bookstore and browsed the shelves while I worked, and when Marion noticed him lingering in the poetry section for the third day in a row, she just smiled at me and said nothing. We went slowly, intentionally, building something with a foundation this time instead of just hope and longing. He moved into a small apartment near Forsyth Park. 1 bedroom, hardwood floors, windows that let in good light. I helped him unpack boxes, hang curtains, arrange furniture. We worked in comfortable silence, passing tools, and making decisions about where things should go. Small domestic choices that felt monumental because we were making them together. One night he ordered pizza, and we sat on his floor, backs against the couch he'd bought secondhand, eating from the box and talking about everything and nothing. What we wanted to do with our lives. Where we wanted to travel. What kind of music we'd make if we started playing again. If I said, not when. He looked at me. I didn't want to assume. Didn't know if you'd want to. After everything, I'd spent a year not playing. A year treating music like something that belonged to a version of me that didn't exist anymore. But sitting there in Clay's apartment, full of cheap pizza and possibility, I realized I'd been wrong. Music wasn't something I'd lost. It was something I'd been protecting, waiting to feel safe enough to touch it again. I said. He smiled. It was the first real smile I'd seen from him in a long time. Unguarded. Full. We started writing together again the next week. He brought his guitar to my apartment one evening after I got off work. We sat on my bed because I didn't have a couch, notebooks open, instruments in hand, and it felt like coming home. The first song came slowly. We were rusty, out of practice, but the language was still there, buried under a year of silence. We found it piece by piece, building melodies and trading verses until something coherent emerged. We wrote about honesty, about the cost of truth and the greater cost of lies, about finding your way back to yourself. Clay wrote a verse that made my chest ache. I built a house on borrowed land, played a part one didn't understand, but the only place that I belong is anywhere you are. We didn't perform. Not yet. Just wrote for ourselves, for each other, building a catalog of songs that told the story we were living. Weeks passed, then a month, then 2. We fell into rhythms. I'd finish work, and he'd be waiting outside the bookstore. We'd walk to get dinner, or go back to one of our apartments and cook something simple. We'd eat and talk and play music and exist in this quiet space we were carving out together. We touched more, small things at first. His hand on my shoulder when he passed behind me in the kitchen. My knee against his when we sat close. Fingers brushing when we reached for the same thing. Then one night, sitting on his couch after a writing session, he kissed me. It wasn't dramatic. Wasn't some big moment we'd built up to. We were just talking, faces close, and he leaned in and pressed his lips to mine. Soft, careful, like a question. I kissed him back, like an answer. We moved to his bedroom. Took our time. Years of wanting distilled into careful touches and whispered confirmations. Is this okay? Yes. This. Yes. Every movement a conversation. Every kiss a sentence we'd been trying to say for years. Afterward, we lay tangled together in his sheets, the window open to let in the night air, and neither of us wanted to let go. Are you sure? I asked. About this. About me. About all of it. He pulled me closer. I've never been more sure of anything. We stayed like that until morning. his arms around me, my head on his chest. Both of us breathing in sync. Both of us finally home. The next morning, I woke up before him, watched him sleep in the early light, his face peaceful and unguarded. I thought about the note he'd slipped me during the ceremony. Please wait for me. I thought about how far we'd come from that moment, how much had broken and rebuilt. I didn't want to wait anymore. Didn't want to hold back or protect myself or prepare for loss. I wanted this. Wanted him. Wanted the messy, complicated, beautiful truth of it. When he woke up, I was still there. Still watching. Still choosing to stay. He smiled at me, sleepy and content. Morning, he said. Morning, I said back. And it felt like the beginning of something that would last. 6 months later, we were living together. Not in some grand romantic gesture. Just a practical decision that felt inevitable. My lease was up. Clay's apartment had room. We talked about it over breakfast one morning and agreed without much discussion. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. I moved my things in on a Saturday. There wasn't much. Books mostly. Clothes. My guitar. The worn notebook I'd been writing in for years. Clay cleared space in the closet, rearranged his bookshelves to fit mine, made room like he'd been waiting for me to fill it. The apartment became ours. Our coffee mugs on the counter. Our guitars leaning against the wall by the window. Our routines woven together until I couldn't remember what my mornings looked like before him. I still worked at the bookstore. Marion had become something like family, and the job fit my life in a way that felt right. Clay found work at a recording studio downtown, doing sound engineering and production. He'd come home with stories about the artists he was working with, the songs he was helping shape. His eyes would light up when he talked about it. He was building the life he actually wanted instead of the one he thought he was supposed to have. We wrote music most evenings, not with any goal or pressure, just because we could, because it was our language and we were finally fluent in it. The notebook that used to hold half-finished lyrics about longing and loss started filling with different songs. Quieter ones, songs about ordinary moments, about making coffee together, about the way light came through the window in the afternoons, about choosing someone every day. We played an open mic night in October, our first performance together in over 2 years. I was terrified, stood backstage with my guitar, and felt my hands shaking, felt the old fear rising that we'd get up there and it wouldn't work anymore, that we'd lost whatever magic we'd had. Clay found me in the narrow hallway behind the stage, took my hand, said it's just us. Like it's always been. We played 3 songs. The room was small, maybe 40 people scattered at tables with drinks and dim lighting. But when we started playing, when our voices found each other in harmony, it felt like we were the only 2 people in the world. The audience was quiet, listening. When we finished, the applause felt genuine. A few people came up afterward to ask if we had recordings. We didn't. Not yet. But maybe someday. Life became ordinary in the best way. We grocery shopped together, argued about whose turn it was to do dishes, fell asleep on the couch watching movies, had friends over for dinner, walked through Forsyth Park on Sunday mornings, did laundry, paid bills, built a life out of small, repetitive moments that added up to something solid. Clay's mother reached out in November, a tentative text asking if they could meet for coffee. He stared at his phone for 10 minutes before responding. We talked about it that night, lying in bed, his head on my chest, my fingers running through his hair. I'm scared, he said. I know. What if she wants me to choose? What if she makes me prove I love her more than I love you? Then you tell her the truth. That love isn't a competition. That choosing me doesn't mean you're not choosing her. He met her the following week. Came home quiet. Sat on the couch, and I sat beside him and waited. She cried. He said eventually. Said she'd been grieving the future she thought I'd have. The grandchildren she'd imagined. The version of me she'd built in her head. But she said she'd rather have me in her life, as I actually am, than lose me, trying to make me into someone I'm not. That's good, I said. It's a start, he agreed. Things weren't perfect. His father still hadn't called. Some of his extended family still didn't acknowledge me. There were holidays we didn't get invited to, family photos we weren't included in. But Clay held firm. Said if they wanted him in their lives, I came too. Non-negotiable. Winter came. The apartment got cold. We bought extra blankets, drank too much tea, spent evenings bundled up together writing songs about the season. Clay wrote a line I loved. We built a home in the middle of the storm, found shelter in each other when the world got cold. One night in December, I was organizing the bookshelf and found the notebook where I'd kept the wedding invitation. I'd forgotten it was there, tucked between pages of lyrics. I pulled it out. The note was still folded inside, the paper soft from being handled so many times. Please wait for me. I looked at it for a long time, remembered sitting in that chapel, remembered the feeling of my world ending and beginning in the same moment, remembered everything that had happened between that day and this one. Clay came up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist, looked over my shoulder at what I was holding. You kept it, he said. I did. He was quiet for a moment. Then he reached for the pen on the shelf, took the note from my hand, unfolded it, wrote something beneath his original message. He handed it back to me. Below his handwriting from the wedding, in fresh ink, he'd written, I'm not waiting anymore. I'm here. I folded the note carefully, put it back in the notebook, turned in his arms to face him. You are, I said. He kissed me, soft and certain. We stood there in our apartment, surrounded by our books and our guitars and the life we'd built together, and it felt like the ending I'd been looking for. The one I didn't know I needed. No grand declarations, no ceremony, just a quiet kind of always. Just us together, choosing each other every day. Just home.